Well, hello, everybody. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Veda. Thanks really very much for inviting me in this moment of music together, meeting and let's say a workshop. And we will talk about Fernando Sor today, one of our great masters. And particularly, I will talk about some of his best studies for guitar. Sor composed totally 24 studies, 49 lessons, and another 34 exercises. So there is a big series of pieces by Fernando Sor. And the first section and the first group of study he wrote is the Opus 6. So we'll start talking about Opus 6 and then the Opus 29, then Opus 31, Opus 35, and at the end the section of lessons exercises, the Opus 60. The first pieces, the Opus 6, was written in London in year between 1815 and 1816. And as it happens very often in this kind of way of writing music from composers, this first part is full of energy, full of ideas, full of music, and it's also the most difficult. So the Opus 6 and Opus 29 are the most important, maybe, part and groups of his studies. And then, you know, his life, he was in London, then he moved to Russia for a period, and then he went at the end. The last part of his life was in Paris. So if we see about all of this story in his studies, it's very interesting because in London he was considered just a star of the guitar, just a concert player, and not only a teacher like he was in Paris, for example. So the first part is Opus 6, and they are very, very inspired pieces of music, and in London they say that these kind of pieces, this kind of compositions have never been listened before Sor. So it was just a surprise, a revelation for classical guitar in London at the beginning of the 19th century. So we go now. I would like to talk about technique of Sor and then talking about some of these pieces together. And it would be nice if at the end of each study, when I just talk about any study, you could just ask me something or doing questions about music, about technique, whatever you like. So I would like to start first with Opus 6, for example, and one of his nice studies. You know, first of all, that Andrés Segovia took a series of these studies, creating his own 20 studies, the choice by Andrés Segovia. Are they the best ones or not? I would say that they are among the best studies that Sor wrote for guitar. So Segovia referred to Napoleon Cost choice, and then he created his own 20 studies choice, the Segovia. So if we talk about, for example, the Opus 6, we refer, for example, to number 3 by Segovia. If you have the score, is this one, all right? So it's the A major, this one. Okay, I not see anybody, but I hope that you are just see me and they are hear me. I hope so. Anyhow, if we talk about this study, it's very interesting because in all Sor's music there is a great ability in in his capacity of using melody and polyphony. In the polyphonic style, he refers to his own period style, so the classical era, but at the same time, he took elements from the Baroque era. All right, so this is a very, very elegant and very linear, so very easy elementary melody, but at the same time with all the balance that he needs. So if we talk about this, it's a sort of melody with the accompaniment. So it's very, very easy. In this point, let's analyze the melody. It goes to the dominant, to the E, from the A. Then there is, after this proposal, a sort of answer. So when we play this piece, we should try to, first of all, to do a legato between all the notes. So following the line of the notes and just the heights of the notes. So this is a proposal, and then E goes back a little. So at the same time, be very careful to what is appoggiatura and resolution, like it's appoggiatura, D sharp, and E resolution. So not, but T, re, do, si, fa, si. If we put them all together, we could have then little lesser. So again, proposing, and now he goes up. So the first one, so when you play this piece, be careful to all this. So very, starting from the low, the basic elements, melody and accompaniment. So you just keep the melody up and the accompaniment less, a bit down. So not, but so let's start from here, from this point, and the first melody, the line of the melody, which can be fluent, like in this way. And at the same time, the second line, the accompaniment, goes up and down together with the melody. Okay? So down. Even here, for example, a bit more and a bit less, both the melody and the accompaniment. Then second, a more positive, and then going up. What about the fingering of the left hand? Well, it's up to you, up to everybody. I think that Segovia did a very good job in fingering. At the same time, he followed his own taste. So which was a very romantic, very passionate, and above all, was a taste linked to the idea of sound, searching for a perfect, for his idea of perfect sound. For example, he likes to end the first half of this piece on the second. And I prefer maybe to take and to keep it in the same mood with the same sound. So I think in this case, we have to choose what is better. If we go towards the second half, for example, there is more power and more energy. Okay, again, melody. For example, here, be careful to this passage. So it's not but, and then so, piano, mezzo forte, piano. Because the melody is la, do, do, si, do, do, do. So this is the melody, and not la, do, do, la, do, do, ma, la, do, do, di. This is appoggiatura. So not. So here it opens. There is a sort of new energy in this final passage, which is the opposite movement of the lines, because the up lines, they goes down and the bass goes up. So, and then final cadenza. Again, be careful to the appoggiatura. It's very important. So, if we compare the first half and the second, the first is the first proposition, and the second half of the piece has more energy. So it means that we can give more lights. And another possibility that I propose you is to divide the repetition with different sounds. So to give a sort of orchestrated vision of the piece, an orchestral vision. For example, then go back. Again, here's forte, cadenza, final cadenza. So what is also very important to me is to have a clarity and, well, to stop the accompaniment every time. So when I do it depends, because I prefer to stop every time. If I look at the structure of this study, we have. So consider just the structure, which is first, second. So you can stop and consider that structure every time. So doing the legato at the same time, but stopping the accompaniment every time. So to do this, I use my thumb in this way. Let's consider also that this is one of the few cases in which Sor asks to, not ask to, but give the possibility to use the ring finger. Usually, we can play all Sor music with 3 fingers and without ring finger. In this case, I think it's more useful. You can play also with medium and the thumb. Let's consider that Sor asked a lot in his method and in many of his studies to play with the thumb. So a thumb that goes up and down on the strings. So not staying only on the basses, but on all the strings. For example, there is the, okay, this study, you know, the number 10, he asked to play with thumb and not, or, so this is an example, but there are many examples. Sor asked to move with the thumb up and down on the strings. In this case, the number 3, Segovia, so Opus 6, number 2, I think it's better to use the ring finger and to use I and M, so index and medium on the accompaniment, and to give more sound, the full sound, when it develops. For example, here on the bass, and here again. So to be very precise, so you see, I stop, I dump the bass every time and not leave, but structure, stop, another, another, another. So this is a very peculiar example of a fabulous melody in a classical style, but with this new way of looking at the technique and the composition structure, which was very, very revolutionary at the time. I don't know if now you would like to ask me something about the piece or not. Well, up to you. Chat, maybe there is a chat here. Let's see. Chat, 20 study. No, nothing special. So I go on. Yeah. Okay, I go on. I'm not looking at, I just see a screen, a black screen, but I hope that everything is just going on. So now I go on with another beautiful piece of music. This is a part of his later music group of pieces. So we're talking about the Opus 35. If anyone has questions, please type. Yeah, you can type if you have questions. So I'm here for you. You just type and ask me. Let's talk first of all about these studies. Giulio, you are doing great. Many thanks. Okay, thank you. You're very kind, very kind. And I'm trying to help you also to give you inspiration and to give, first of all, passion and love for this beautiful music. Wonderful, marvelous, amazing music by Fernando Sor. I go on with another wonderful study, the Opus 35, number 22, the famous number 5 by Andrés Segovia, and we are talking about this, okay? I think that all of you have played or will play soon this piece, so it's a pleasure for me to talk about this. So, it's a piece in B minor, and I think Opus 35, we're talking about a series of lessons written in Paris. So it's just the final part of his life. And these are just studies, easier from a technical point of view, but at the same time very refined, talking about harmony and about the development of the melody of this beautiful piece. If we read through the piece, we can see an arpeggio in B minor, of course, which is, you know, okay, and going on. So I think that all of you know about this piece, then I will play it. Anyhow, what is interesting to me is always to see what happens inside the piece. There is a line of a melody, and there are voices inside this arpeggio. I like to imagine all these pieces in an orchestral or chamber music or piano, violin version. I try to imagine, because this kind of music, this classical music written for orchestra, chamber music, solo instruments like the piano, the cello, the violin, etc. That was the point of reference, even for these guitarist composers like Sor, like Giuliani. So let's say that Sor, Giuliani, and I don't know, Merz, the romantic ones, Costa, and all the others, Legnani too, they wrote, Carulli, they wrote music referring to other kind of music. So this music comes from outside the guitar. So when we read through the pieces, I think it's very important to find the right point of reference of this music. In this case, I think that we could arrange this beautiful study for example, for string quartet. Why? Because they ask me why, it's an arpeggio. Where is the quartet? How can you arrange for quartet? So what I say is that let's start from the melody first. Let's always start from the melody. Melody is the singing line, so which is the most important line. Even in the Baroque music, even in the Baroque era, for example, in the fugues, the imitations structures like the fugue and others, they're always melodies, even if it's a dialogue between melodies. In this music, classical music, there is a melody and there is something else, something which helps the melody. So the melody is clear, is this? Melody, pure melody, okay? Sad melody, not terribly sad, it's just melancholic, okay? So this could be first violin. Then we have the bass, which is in all the first part, there is a pedal. So there are no changes in the harmony. And this pedal gives the sense of stillness and of sadness, because nothing is moving. It's like a melancholic day in autumn times when you see the drops of rain on the glass, on the window. So there is the image that we have of this piece. And so let's talk about the other lines. For example, cello. And then we can have a viola. Pa, pa, dum, pa, 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 di, do, do, okay, then the second violin. Pa, pam, pa, pam, pam, pa, pam, pam, pa, pam, pam, pa, pam, pam, so if you look at the piece in this way, it's very interesting because you will balance all the voices. I think on the guitar, it's interesting if you can have a melody with a peculiar sound, the sound that you like, the best sound that you need and that you want to create and to search for. Then on the bass, for example, you can use sometimes the nail, sometimes just the flash. So like in this way, to have the deepness of the sound in the bass, different from the melody. Otherwise, this way, it's very similar. So sometimes you can change and decide the kind of sound that you like on any voices. So if we start now analyzing the movement in harmony, which means also, because harmony is emotion. So when harmony moves and the movement of the harmony, they just determine the, and they take you to the movements of emotions of your heart. For example, the first part, in the first phrase, nothing special is happening except staying still, thinking about this moment, this melancholic moment. So when you do it, you just increase a bit the power, you just grow up and then go down. Go back. Okay, and this is the first phrase. What I do is to have the melody to give more weight to the melody, so not, which can be also nice, interesting. To me, melody is more important and it guides you through the story of the piece. The melody is just the line of the story. So again, with the right hand, we can use modern fingering or the fingering of Fernando Sor. So using the thumb, or if you like, this is modern with index. I think, to my taste, to get the best result, maybe the thumb even on this, let's say the viola, okay, the alto voice, I think could be better. But if you like, if you prefer another sound, it depends on you. What I like is just, then go back, go down, and then up again, second voice, and then go back. This G is very important. It's a sort of cadenza, false cadenza. So when you have the G, please just underline with more power and more intensity in that G when you change, because it's a peculiar and very interesting change in mood, emotionally. So second time. So it's a sort of hope, a moment of change, a possible change, a positive change in this sad mood. But then go back. Yeah? So you just do a crescendo on the G and then go back. That's the story of this moment. So the second phrase. Okay, and then go back. Okay, so if we do all the first section, the first part. So another important question: what's the speed, the right speed of this piece? Just follow always, apart from the indication of the composer, which is very important, but just try to follow also what is the line of a singing melody. So there is a complete breath on that line. If we play too slow, maybe you can lose this line. If you play which is a bit slow. So I think it's better sort of allegretto, moderato. Go down. Crescendo, diminuendo, piano. Then the second part. The second part starts with a pedal, so a fixed note in the bass, which is very, very sad because nothing is happening in all the first part of the second section. So the melody, and consider also another point that the melody range is in 3 notes or 4. So from D to F sharp, even here, F sharp, E, D, or C sharp. So it's just in 4 notes, so nothing is happening. There is no possibility of developing an action because it's just sad. It would be nice if we can see more of his right hand finger patterns. Can see annular, thanks. Yes, if we can see more of his right hand finger patterns. Well, if you consider, I suggest you, Kenneth, Isaac, yeah, I think I suggest you to read through his method, because his method tells very clearly to play that without even the ring finger, just using 3 fingers. You can play all this piece with 3 fingers, with these 3 fingers. So like, see, okay? And if you want really to go, and I suggest you to go to the heart of his philosophy, please just read his method, his guitar method, which is a series not only of exercises, but above all of sort of tale of his philosophy of music and on the guitar, which is very, very interesting because above all, he talks very much about fingerings, even in these studies, okay? Not particularly in this one, but in all others. So going on with the piece, you adjust your camera. Ah, sorry. Okay, like that, maybe. Okay, it's better now, maybe. Okay. Because, you know, if I want to read through, it's very nice. Like that, okay, maybe. Can you hear me? Yes, can you hear me anyhow? Okay. And, okay. Second half now. We go. Apoyando preferable. So that's another important question. Is apoyando not apoyando? What I suggest you is to use possibly a modern technique. The modern technique on the guitar helps us to use the sound, the kind of sound of an apoyando without doing apoyando. Because apoyando is very nice for the sound, for the deepness and the power or the intensity of the sound, but it has a problem at the same time. The problem is that it stops, it dumps every time the notes, and in this case, I go and dump every time the note, because when I do apoyando, I dump the string under the notes. So what I suggest is possibly to develop a modern technique, the technique of the last 20 years, maybe 24, 20, 30 years, from the 90s. Let's say the Scott Tennant pumping nylon. So that kind of playing the guitar, just pushing the strings. Okay, so I push the strings towards towards the table, the top of the guitar, but at the same time, I don't doing the rest stroke, real apoyando, but I do that. In this case, it's the same, because I play, for example, the melody, okay, with more power. I just push a bit more in the, and then here I'm not pushing, and here. Okay, I push more, okay. So I think we would need probably another workshop on this, or you will follow other workshops about technique. This is the right hand technique. It's very important to have this technique balancing and learning how to use the weight of your fingers on the strings. Is the skin used more than the nail to play it loudly? I would not say that. I think the sound, anyhow, the sound derives from the nail. So that is the sound. What happens before, I think it's less, let's say in brackets, it's less important. To have legato, for example, in arpeggio, I think you should avoid going back to the strings too early. Otherwise, you go and damp the strings every time. I just make an example. For example, if I play, if you want to have legato, okay, I go back to the strings just some real moments, a moment before playing the string. I'm not doing. This is prepared technique. I don't use usually prepared technique of the right hand, tecnica preparata. I prefer not to use it. Sometimes I use, but not often. And at the same time, what is very important is the nail. So the shape of the nail, the kind of nail, and also, of course, the way, if you play like that, or, okay, the inclination of your nail is very important. I use a modern technique. I sometimes play like that, but also usually, so with a very deep and warm sound, like in this case. But sometimes it's very important to have also this kind of sound. But usually, going back to the question, I'm not playing with rest stroke, and I use the nail. So when I go back to the melody and to every note I pluck, I just try to let the strings ring the most possible time, the more time as possible. So without damping, in this way, but, and I suggest you, when you practice these pieces, to just play them slowly, because only playing slowly, you can check everything. So if you have other questions, please tell me, it's very nice. We go back to the piece, talking about music now, also, because I think that music, it's the line that is important for us to follow, and the technique will follow the music we have in mind. So the second part, again, melody. So nothing is happening here, okay? You see? And from here, the bass comes in. Dramatic. So this is a great change in the piece, from the P7 with a modulation. So here there is a crescendo every time, dramatic. Diminuendo, and go back to. Crescendo, the last shape. And here cadenza falsa. So, and go back. So this is the piece. There is another question. Can you please discuss more about some differences between the old technique and the new technique? Yeah. Okay, I think it's very important. The old technique was the classical technique from the era, let's say, of Andrés Segovia, or Narciso Yepes, or even Alirio Diaz, the great masters. Then from John Williams and above all David Russell and Manuel Barrueco on, this new kind of technique just took his power, let's say. What is the difference? In the old, let's say the old times, and I remember these old times, I was a little boy, and so there was the technique divided into two possibilities, rest stroke and free stroke. Rest stroke and rest stroke. So to have the balance and in the same piece, for example, in these kind of pieces like arpeggios or melody, when you have a melody with a complete like, okay, you use and we used to, and they all used to have to use the rest stroke on the melody and the free stroke on the accompaniment. So that was more or less the difference. There was also another position in the hand and also the arm. It was like that, you know, they used to play like this. And I think that all technique was good from many points of view. For example, it had and gave a variety in the sounds that today is not so open. For example, they used to start from here to here to there. So all the kind of sounds, if you use this angulation of your fingers on the strings, gives you a variety in sounds, in terms of sound, which I like, and I think it's a quality of the guitar. With the modern technique, they said, okay, now just try, let's try not to have the rest stroke to give power to the notes, but let's find a way, possibility to have a powerful, intense sound without having rest stroke. And that was the new way. So, and they all tried to study this possibility of pushing down the string without resting on the string next to it. So not like that, but like that. I just push and then not resting on the string. This is the modern technique. If you develop it, just pushing all the time, you know, I push, we push now all the time, beat the weight of every finger on the strings, gives us and to everybody possibility of having, even in an arpeggio, without damping strings, without changing position, because what is the bad thing of the old technique? That sometimes you have to change all the time the position of your hand, while now it's possible to have the same position in the hand without moving too much, which gives you more efficiency in the technique, for example. At the same time, the rest stroke damps the string, and the modern tocco apoyando, I call it semi-apoyando, because it's an apoyando, but without resting the string, the finger on the string. So it's a sort of medium way. You go down, you don't rest on the string, but you go down and then go up. So this is the modern technique, which gives you really a possibility of going faster also, but without losing power. And another, I think, bad side of the old technique was that the free stroke was very weak and the rest stroke very powerful. So there was a difference between the two strokes. Now you can have a variety, but with no big differences. So you can just deal with all these kind of weights and decisions in terms of weights very, I think, more easily. Okay. And above all, going even faster, if you like, I have a question regarding the first section, cadence. Would you play the last melody, note B, as an open string and redistribute the other notes on the third and fourth, and based on the sixth string, the resonance of the chord, you mean the cadence, the first section cadence? You mean this one, maybe? First section cadence. Would you play the last melody note B as an open string and redistribute? Well, what I think, at the last bar, you mean the last bar, this one you mean, or you mean like, well, I think, yes. So thank you for all these questions, because it's very interesting to me to work like that and to interact with you. So what I think about fingering here, following Sor and let's say the beginning of this period, the classical era of the guitar, I think that, for example, it was very rarely they played in this part of the fingerboard because of the guitar, because of many reasons. In these pieces, for example, it's interesting to analyze the pieces even in this from this point of view. I think that it's very easy and very simple the way he uses just all these positions all the time. It's obvious that we can change it. We can change every time. For example, we can go wherever, even from the beginning. Okay, we can change all the time, and I think that could be also very interesting, because the sound here is so warm. Or, as you say, for example, because you have a longer, yeah, because in this case you see the B that it lasts two movements. You're right, in this point you have to stop. Okay, I think in this case it's not so important, you know, and so why not? Also, that can be a possibility. Why not? I think this is not a very important point in my view, personal. So I think if I stop, I dump the notes just an octave before. I prefer to have because in all the piece I have that B which is on the third string. For example, let's start from here. And above all, it doesn't sound like, let's say, this is not a classical, romantic guitar, a Sor position or like that. I think it's not in the style of that music. So I understand why you're asking, just you can have the note ringing. But at the same time, I think it's more modern, like a vision. But why not? I think it's not in the style of Sor, but sometimes we can also change things and doing things more modern. So what else? This is the piece. what I like more in music every time. Okay, thank you. What I like more in music is to find the emotional way, the story of these and the other pieces. And in this case, I think that the most important thing is to use dynamic. Please use dynamic. Use dynamic. In this case, you can develop, for example, when you have the modulation, that modulation, you need more weight, developing energy, developing emotion there. And then you go back very weak in this. Even the bass will be weak. But here, I use sort of rest stroke. Even here, rest stroke without just pushing and without resting on the string, but I do like that. Okay, this is other thing. So I have the bass here. Okay, it's very important even in a chord. When I have the chord, if I want to have the B, the bass in evidence, so or I need the first string, I just push the second, in this case, the first voice, I push more this voice, and or I need maybe the B, I push B a bit more, my idiom, or I need the F sharp. Okay, I'm just playing all the strings together, but every time I push a bit more. And so in this case, even when I pluck an entire chord, I can have one voice just underlined and more powerful and intense. So let's go on. Maybe we have time for other pieces. Are you tired? I don't know, maybe. I hope not, but there are fantastic studies. Let's go through, for example, could you suggest a number between what I gave you, the Opus 6 number 8, which is a choral. Very interesting is Opus 6 number 3 with the slurs, for example. You know that? This is very interesting from the technical point of view. I mean, and if you like, just not, be so long on this study, but I would like to tell about the technique, because when I first studied this piece is interesting because there are chords and slurs. Okay. Very important is the rhythm here because it's tarada and not tarabam, with accent on the first note. Paraba, boom, paraba, boom, tarada, boom, tarada. So. Okay, let's see the technique of this piece, which is very interesting. I think to have, sorry, which study number? You're right. It's an Opus 6 number 3. Opus 6 number 3 is in the Segovia number is number 11. Okay, thank you. Okay, so Kenneth, if you look at this piece, we have chord, then pausa, and then slash on the 3 note with the accent on the first, and then, all right. So, but what we need to do is to stop strings and to stop the little scales every time. The method to do it properly, because we can do in 2 ways, like that, stopping, the chord, but you see, you listen, then all these strings vibrating sympathy, Okay, so the only way to damp it is just to use your thumb like that. In this case, you have to change the position of your hand every time, like that. So what I do is like stopping, okay, damping 5 strings with my thumb and with another finger on the first. So like that, and then pluck with, for example, index and damp with medium. So in this case, so I damp, you know, with the thumb 5 strings, and then with another, just with another finger, I damp the first string, like that. Okay, in this case, the piece will be very clean. So just, it's very important, the technique. I know that some pupils of mine, they told me, Giulio, it's a bit too difficult, not to control everything. But if you want to be very clean, I think that is the way. Because if you just dump, you can, like that, you know, all this vibration. So you have to stop it because, oh. And about, for example, here is interesting, you have also in this piece, which is a bit more technical, there are developments in the harmony, in the melody. For example, from the first to the second and third position, you have the basic chord, E major, then the B7, okay? So a bit more power, more tension, and then release. Bum, ba-da-bum, bum, ba-da-bum, dum, da-da-dum, dum, da-da-dum. Okay, 1, 2, 1, and 0, or 1, 2, 1, or 2, 3, 2, 1. Dynamic too, okay? Or go back again. For example, the second. Then cadenza from here. Okay, and then the piece goes on with that in minor, but again. Okay, which is to have these, you please, you give power here, and the important is not to give me. Not, it's not very, it's a bit strange, a bit peculiar. So is it clear here? Your internet connection is unstable. I hope that you can see me now. I'm moving, yes, everything, I hope so. You know, the lockdown has caused also problems in the connections here in Italy too. Anyhow, well, I do like that. Chord is just A major, E, and G, and G major, yeah. Okay, like that. So, like that, I play like that. Okay, so the thumb, I damp 5 strings, and with, for example, in this case, with the medium, or index, I damp the first. So, like that, together. Okay. Then from here, and stop with the medium. Okay. So it's the same, every time. Then, every time I go back here, thumb with 5 strings and the thumb, and this is my index or medium on the first. And for the first string, it's very important, I pluck and then damp with the other, with another finger. Which is very important. And just keeping the thumb. Otherwise, if I don't keep the thumb, again, there is a vibration in the strings, okay? So I want to avoid vibration. I want to be very, very clean. So, even here, you know what I do here? For example, I use my pinky finger to damp the first, for example. Otherwise, there is also a little vibration. So I do that like that. For example, in this case, I need to damp 4 strings because I have to go on the second. So this is the technique of the piece. I hope it's clear for you. Okay. Then what else? So there is a development. I hope that first of all the connection is going well. I hope so, that you all can see me now. And then the piece develops a lot, and what I suggest you in this kind of piece is also to follow the melody, to creating dynamics. For example, dynamics everywhere. For example, let's analyze this. There is always in music, in tonal music, a stable point, a quiet point, a point of release and a point of tension. Usually, the first grade of the scale is the point of release, and the fifth grade is the point of tension. So, for example, let's consider this. Okay, it's the first, let's say, number one, and then this is tension, and then go back. So, more, then another proposal. For example, here there is also a modulation. What I would suggest now, otherwise we don't have much time, I would like now to talk about other 2 or 3 studies, and then maybe you can ask me about many other things, not only Sor, because I know that many of you would like to talk about other pieces, other music. Do you have any other questions on this piece, or I can go on maybe? For example, another example, very important, but I will be very fast in this way, is the Opus 31, number 20. Is the number 9 of Andrés Segovia. Again, we have the chords. Okay, how to play all this staccato, this which is not staccato, a chord, rest, chord, pause, chord, pause. So at the same time, I use my thumb to dump the basses, because if I play only, can you listen to the noise of this chord, of the string? So in this case, okay? Okay, it's all regarding all the possibility of damping the strings, which is very important in this study. Another thing which I consider peculiar, and please be careful to them, is that the articulation sometimes changes in this study. And it happens very often in Sor music. For example, sometimes we find the long chords. So when you find long chords, second page, for example, here the bass is very important. So with your thumb, yes, the left hand staccato. Yeah, I think the staccato in Sor music, it's an articulation. There are 2 kinds above all of staccato. The real staccato, which is a staccato like the strict staccato, like an accent also, and the medium staccato, pam, pam, pa, pam, 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 tim, pam, tim, tim. For example, these chords are staccato, but at the same time they are medium staccato. They're not, but they imitate, for example, the pizzicato. I think to have the staccato, good staccato on Sor music, and in every kind of staccato, not only Sor, I think you should use your two hands. The left hand, just for example, this piece, you just take off. Okay, in this case, but what gets you the result of a good staccato is your right hand anyhow. So I suggest you to work more with your right hand to control the staccato and to decide the kind of staccato. You have legato, no, for example, medium staccato, and staccato. Okay, in the staccato, final staccato, you can just also you can just leave, you know, the note after you play. While in the medium staccato, you stay down and you just use your this is medium staccato, staccato, real staccato. Okay, and legato. Okay, then you can have, for example, the bass staccato and the upper notes legato, for example. Let's do an example. I don't know, even of this melody. We do staccato in the bass, for example, or the opposite, the bass legato and the staccato in the upper notes. Okay, I use the right hand to control all the articulation. In this case too, for example, then again, pausa. Here, for example, you have the chord, long chord. If you just can look at the score, you have, I have short B, short C, and short A. But the chord long, the chord is long, so short, short, long, for example, here also long, cool, please. Yeah. Okay. Okay. And then, for example, here I use a left hand, but above all, the right hand. So again, chord, long chord. Hello, hello. How are you? For example, here, pam, chord, long chord, and I so long and short. For example, here again is short. So it's very important to follow. So this is the piece at the end, and we have talked about staccato and about this technique. I think it's useful here in Sor, but not only in Sor music. But one of the issue, that we have to follow is the articulation. When you play music, any kind of music, articulation is like the articulation in your speech when you talk, and to make your speech clear, you have to underline some phrase and some ideas, and some other are not so important. So you use articulation, you use dynamic, like in a normal speech, even in music, it's the same element. So let's talk now about another study. For example, this is the Opus 35 number 17, which is the number 6 in the Segovia numbers, number 6. In Segovia, he did a mistake at the beginning. He write not a big mistake anyhow. And at the same time, let's analyze the melody, for example, of this piece, which is very nice. So, when we play that, we should try to put together in contact the last note, because we have a section of the chords and then, but the point, if you want to have a legato in the melody, you put together so like having a little, very little accent. Ta-ti, ta-ti, ta-ta, ta-ta, ti-ta, ta-ti, ta-ta, ta-ta, and not So when you play all these pieces, please be careful to the elements of the melody, accompaniment, the structure, and the development in the harmony and in the melody. In this case, the fingering is very easy in the right hand because bit more now, because there is a development of the idea. Then, second part. So, so every time. Okay. Okay. In this case, for example, again, tim da ti fa si da ti do si do ti da ti dum da ti do. So there is an arpeggio again, but more than playing. Okay, like in this case, with all the notes at the same, with the same weight, the same intensity. In this case, we have a polyphonic vision of the piece every time, and I suggest you to open and let's say the sound, the dimension, the profundity of the guitar, of the structure opens more in using this kind of playing. So what I suggest you is to develop this new technique, the modern technique, and to approach these pieces in this way, let's say in an orchestral chamber music way. Let's say, for example, how can we give this piece to another chamber music? For example, I can have or even a flute, with the accompaniment of the piano and the flute, for example, it could be perfect for this piece. Of course, you know that the Segovia version has some mistakes. What I do for the fingering, I use a modern fingering, a bit different from this fingering. At the same time, please correct the mistakes of Segovia. For example, at the end. For example, here what happens? There is a modulation. The last time. Okay, for example, when you play this piece and when I study this piece, I try really to have a different weight and to play very slowly. Okay, so here, more weight. So I try, you know, to divide the two sides and the two floors. So the first floor, melody, the second floor, accompaniment. And so this will be very clear and powerful and the accompaniment. Then I'm not saying that you just keep them so far one from the other, but at the same time, the accompaniment sometimes becomes important. For example, here, when you have this voice, I think here is very important because or another example was, you remember the number 3? In this case, it's very important. While here, it's less important, but here, okay. And let's say we have many examples. We can and we could go on for a long time. Anyhow, let's talk just to end this my speech on this Sor studies. Maybe this could be chapter number 1 because really we could go on with many other studies and analyze all of them because they're all marvelous pieces of music and masterworks in terms of polyphony, structure, style, referments. So this is Opus 31, number 16. It's number 8 in Sor in Segovia, which is like the For example, this is the study. What is interesting here is the point of reference. In my view, this is very clear. This is not so classical. This is more Baroque because just the kind of structure of this piece is Baroque, the melody, and it's a sort of counterpoint. So it's not only melody, but we have two voices. And the style in the bass, to have a good line in the bass, is that of a Baroque cello. So not long note, but more medium staccato, for example, here. part, how can you do that? First of all, because be careful if you do. You have this A going on, so you have to damp it, like, and I use the index on the last. So, even here we have staccato. What opus number? So it's opus 31, number 16. It's not an easy study, above all in the second half. But apart from the difficulty, I think that if you find the right reference, the right mood of the piece, you really can have a very joyful experience, because you recreate a kind of music, a kind of historical period, and that is very interesting. And you recreate also at the same time not only guitar, but you can see a cello player, an orchestra, a piano, a choir where in the first one of Segovia, so it's a choir, so it's not like, but the choir, it's like here, the voices. Okay, but let's go back to the Opus 13, number 16. So, okay, so first of all, I think you could study the two voices separate. And then the bass. But I go with the thumb. Okay, putting them together now. Okay, which is the main voice? Here we don't have main voice because it's a counterpoint. So both the two voices are important. In the second half, so I know that this is not very easy. What I suggest you is, sometimes not to have the right position with the finger in this position, but you can just have this, and this, in this case, you can go here and have, for example, or yeah, in this case, I don't need to have these, but I can have this, okay? And it's very much easier. So again, which is the voice? So okay, again, staccato from here, and again, legato, again, then all staccato or not. So and so, let's say that the cello is staccato, but in the same way we have a medium sometimes articulation, so it's not, but can be. So sometimes can be short, 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 or long, short, long, short, or or staccato. You can mix and decide. Could you elaborate on the phrasing and the different staccato used in the bass line? Elaborate on, yes, the phrasing, yeah. what I'm just talking about it. For example, what I suggest, there is no great difference. I think it's not all staccato, it's not all the, but the style that they use sometimes is to have a rest on some notes. So, so when you want to give strength and intensity to some of these notes, you give them more weight and you play them longer. So, for example, so here, even here, but it can be also, but also, so you see, all the possibilities are good. I think there is not the best and absolutely perfect one, but the general point is to have anyhow an articulation and staccato in the bass line and then legato in the up lines. I think that is the philosophy, and everywhere, if we go towards the final part, for example, here also, but it can be also very good. So I think the main point is to have a sort of balanced way of choosing. For example, in this way, you have a progression. The progression is, okay, so similar elements. It's just not a real progression, but similar to progression. In this way, you could use the same way. If you do, so using more or less the same way in the two. Or so I think they are all good if you have your own idea. In the last execution, I just had legato on this final scale. So for example, so I think they're all good, but the general mood and the way I'm playing this piece is not to do in the legato all the time, but to divide the two lines. So there is the lines in the voices, two voices, and the lines of the cello, I say, the staccato, or it can be a bassoon, I don't know, as just like to your imagination. And well, it's 3 o'clock now here, so in Italy, in Brescia, where I live. After the lockdown, we are in phase number 2 now. We hope that now things will get better and better all over the world. And I hope to visit India really this December. So if you have other questions on technique, on music, repertory, everything, I'm just here for you for some minutes, some moments. I don't know how many of us are now, maybe 10, 20, or 200, I don't know really. So 36, oh, 35, so good, fantastic, Veda. So good number of people here, and if you have other questions, otherwise I can go on and talking about these pieces to talking about music. As you see, this is my approach to music. My approach is to understand the style of every composer. I play a lot also of contemporary music. Veda, the beginning and the introduction was telling you about my Francisco Tárrega interpretations. Well, just to tell you, and if it can be useful to you, my approach to music is a sort of balance. Who have this time to stay? Go on. Many of us, okay. And you play consecutive open bass strings. How do you damp the preceding? That's the point, because as I say in this piece, sometimes the risk in this piece is to have the A ringing up to the end of the piece, okay? And when you put your guitar in the case, the A is still ringing, okay? Like that, okay. You mean in this? It's still going on, still going on. Yes, I know what you mean. I do like that. The technique is like that. And then I use the index. Or I can do also, and then, right? Okay, every time I go with the thumb to damp, because to my ears, I don't like really when I hear all this noise, okay, this boiling water in this bass line. So I try always to then or so this is the point. Okay, and this is not so easy, but try please to do it. I think that when I was, a kid, as was a child playing this piece, I really didn't know how to do it. And my teacher at the time, he was not worried about, and he told me, Giulio, don't worry, it's just an A ringing. Okay, I don't like that A ringing. So, stories of life. So, I prefer like and then what else? Now I was talking about my approach to music, approach to studies. So the spirit, the aim of a piece, the composer style, and I try to understand also what is the aim of the composer. And I think this was really a terrific session. Looking forward. Oh yes. Yes, a session on Tárrega would be very, very nice. When I first played Tárrega, I try to, at the time, to give, energy, modernity to the tradition. I think this is what we have to do in every field, in architecture, in art, and cuisine also. I mean, to have an innovation, renovation in the tradition. So you just don't lose what is tradition. Don't lose, please, what really Fernando Sor or Francisco Tárrega, their thoughts, their aims, their purposes. I think this is very important. For example, this is the Baroque reference in the study that we are talking about now. But in another point, there is a romantic mood, and we have to find a way of taking it out. In Tárrega is the same. And we will do a special section of Tárrega, Veda. I really want to do it for all of you, because Tárrega is always another world. And in that case, we have different souls. So the romantic, the exotic, Spanish, and Arabic mood. Then we have the European mood, let's say the dances not from Spain, which are, for example, the valse, the polka. These dances, the mazurka, they are not from Spain. So what Tárrega did was to take these dances from Poland, from France, from Germany, from Austria, and taking them to Spain. And that was very interesting. And so what does it mean? For example, when you play the Grand Valse, you know, the Grand Valse, I played the beginning, the Grand Valse by Francisco Tárrega, you know. I do an example for you. You know that? For example, I try to understand, together with the tradition, together with the sound of the guitar, what meant to me and what could mean to Tárrega the idea of an Austrian, a valse from Austria, okay? Which is the Wien valse, you know, the Johann Strauss valse, for example. And if I just try to understand, I listen to a lot of valses by Johann Strauss, and I try to articulate, for example, this valse in a Wien style. So putting together Spain and Wien and Johann Strauss. And so, for example, in the style of Johann Strauss, there is no, you know, but there is an articulation in twos often because it calls, you know, the dance. So, so more weight on the E. So this is the Wien Strauss valse. So when we play, so let's start, for example. Okay, this is the first step. Then the second step is in the instrumentation. For example, the accompaniment, often it's not legato, and sometimes the second beat is anticipated. So this is the Wien valse, and the bass too. So sono not only but and then here so you see articulation, and this becomes, oh wow, we are in Wien now, because these are for example, European pieces and not the Spanish pieces in Tárrega music. Listening to you is listening. Yes, I try to recreate an idea of an orchestra. You know, Segovia used to say, there is a fantastic video, please go and watch it on YouTube also, of Segovia talking about the different sounds, bassoon, horns, strings, voices on the guitar. It's very, very interesting. To me, the voice and also the human voice is here, and the string and the strings like violin and cellos are in this position. So, and the wind instruments here. So what I try, you know, it depends on the style. I move my hand. For example, Latin American music needs sometimes a rhythmic sound here. And when you have classic and melodic pieces, it's better to play them just in this position. And then, as I told you before, even the angulation of your nails changes a lot. From here, for example. So very soft. And also all these sounds. I think if you want to play this music, and even Sor music, first of all, let's try. I say to myself, I try all the time to find the best possible point of reference of this music. Your recording, thank you. The Grand Vals, yes, to have a workshop on Tarrega. So Veda, we will plan a special workshop on Tarrega because there are many works. The mazurka, for example, how to play the mazurkas. They are fantastic pieces of music. And my question, when I was studying the mazurkas and all the Tarrega music, for example, the mazurka, was to find balance. Find balance between the Spanish style and the idea of the sound of Tarrega and the style and the kind of music he wrote. For example, to put together Spain and Austria, Spain and France together, Spain and Italy together. Because if we play the Fantasia o la Traviata, Arcas, Tarrega, or the variations on the Carnival of Venice, there is an Italian mood. We cannot say it's a Spanish piece. So what's the Italian attitude? How can we play on the guitar Italy or play Spain or play, different moods? And in this case, I think that it helps you a lot. Going back to Sor, for example, it helps you really a lot if you listen to music, a lot of music every day. I think if you have a day studying classical guitar, classic music, for example, I don't know, 3 hours, 4 hours, I think you should have at least then 1 hour, 2 hours listening to music in your car, in the night, while you're reading, and all the kind of I think of classical music and styles that you can have from the chamber, orchestral, solo with orchestra, which is very interesting, the relation, because we don't have many guitar concertos. We are, I don't know, 10, 20, let's say the main concertos. But if you think about Mozart, Beethoven, Liszt concertos, Chopin concertos, it's very interesting, the relation between the solo instrument and the mood of all this music. And when we play music, for example, I have here the study number 13 with the sixth, no? For example, this is so dark, this study. We need a dark sound. It's not. It's so, there is nostalgia in this space, no? And the nostalgia and the sweet atmosphere of this piece, the delicate, is underlined, for example, by this interval, which is the sixth. The sixth used by, the main composers when they want to create a sort of delicate, of sweet atmosphere, and he uses, this is a study on the sixth. And in this case, it's very important to follow the line with dynamic. I call them microdynamics. Microdynamics are these, so not big dynamics, but the dynamics which follow the lines. So So first time goes back, second time goes up. So let's follow. And when you play with your right hand, for example, just to be clear, I try to think about numbers, which can be 3, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5, 4. So the line is so clear. So not big dynamic, but even in piano, when you are piano, you just can have these micro dynamics on the line. Let's think that the guitar has not a big range in dynamics. So we have to work on little kind of energies. So thank you. You're recording? Yes, Tarek, next time. And another thing, another suggestion that I can tell you about my music life is that I was very open when I was studying in my 20s, but even before, I was and I am really interested in contemporary music for two reasons, or more than two reasons, but the main reasons are that I love to be in touch with composers because I am an interpreter. I'm not a composer. I wrote something, but at the moment, I'm not a composer. I think personally that to write a proper composition, like to write a proper romance, you must practice it. So it's not easy. You have to study years to reach a good point, to compose a proper composition, musical composition. So I love to be in touch with composers and to be in touch with their mind, with their idea of music. And at the same time, another reason is that the technique of of contemporary compositions is very open, and there is a big variety of possibilities in sound, technique. Everything is possible on a contemporary guitar, and it was not easy for me, even because sometimes it's so difficult to approach that music. But it was so interesting to me that when I went back to the repertory of Tarrega, of Giuliani, of Castelnuovo Tedesco, I tried to have the same attitude that I have with the composers, nowadays composers. Which attitude is that? When I meet, a friend, a composer, I try to, above all, to meet this person and to know this person and to understand him or her, because I think that is the first step when we want to get in touch to a piece of music. We read the text, okay, we read the text, but at the same time, I think if we can know the idea of the composer, that is the best thing that we can have, because we have a text which is I think it doesn't need the composer. No, it's just a text. Okay, we can play it. But if we know the idea of the composer, his attitude, his desires, what he thought when he wrote this piece, I think it can help us a lot. So starting from that thought, I just I did the same itinerary even in classical and in romantic music. So I try to find what is really in the mind of Sor, and to understand him, to understand Giuliani, it's important to know what Giuliani was listening to. For example, Rossini music. For example, the music of Wien, where he lives. Also the music, his friend Moschles, for example, the piano player. Or another thing which is important when we play that music is to find the thought and the point of reference of any piece. or this minuet. Okay, so I think that, and I hope that this moment of music was could be helpful for you. Oh, sorry, I'm talking since 2 hours now, and I have to drink something possibly. And if you have some questions, that will be very welcome. Otherwise, I think that we can have another date about Riga, maybe next time, if you like. And it will be really, really a pleasure to meet all of you in December this year. I will come to India, and I'm just looking forward to it.